So I've been saving up to buy a Nintendo Switch, and today is finally the day.
Wait, what? Stunt Racer 64 for $289? Who buys an N64 game for almost $300? Stunt Racer 64 is one of the rarest games on the system, and very sought after by hardcore N64 collectors. A complete copy of the game was actually sold recently for almost $1,000, which is absolutely nuts. But that made me wonder, how did it end up being so rare? The game was developed by Boss Game Studios, who had seen pretty solid success with their previous racing title for the 64 called World Driving Championship, one of the last driving simulator titles for the system. While it was met with pretty great reviews all around the board, it struggled immensely due to the competition over its Sony having Gran Turismo 2 in the same year, showing how the PlayStation could do racing in a more realistic style. Midway published World Driving Championship and was eager to get back into bed with the studio for another racing title. This time, however, Boss Game Studios wanted to make something a lot more wacky, something that wasn't based on simulating real driving. This title was to be called Stunt Racer 3000, a futuristic high-speed racing game that would take place in, you guessed it, the year 3000. However, at some point in development, Midway got together a bunch of focus groups who said that they did not quite get the name.
Not the most brilliant minds ever.
Either way, this forced Boss to change the name to Stunt Racer 64. I guess they wanted it to take place a few decades after the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. The game was slated for a worldwide release by Midway sometime in the latter part of the year 2000. However, the game was officially cancelled, with the reason given being that Boss Games missed the delivery date. This is very hard to believe though, since the game must have been very close to completion at this point. Now, this next part is not confirmed by Midway or Boss Games, but is widely the accepted speculation. Midway was also publishing another game by the name of San Francisco Rush 2049 later the same year. These two games have very similar concepts, both being futuristic style racers, so one has to wonder if Midway's thought process went like,
after all, why not? Why shouldn't I?
The publisher may have thought that releasing two ridiculously similar titles on the same system so close to one another may hurt sales figures. This could have led them to look for any excuse to cancel Stunt Racer, since Rush 2049 was already a hit in arcades, and they wanted to make sure the game sold well. Not long after the news of the cancellation though, rumors started popping up that Midway was considering a much smaller North American only release. These rumors turned out to be true. The game released to the now pretty much defunct rental chain Blockbuster. I mean, did you know they have a streaming service now? Yeah, I didn't think so. Stunt Racer 64 became a rental only, which was usually seen as the bottom of the barrel when it came to games. Basically, this happened when a game was finished, but the publisher had so little faith in it they thought, screw it, this'll make a quick buck. The thing is, Stunt Racer was met with great reviews. People thought it was a really fun game, which is to say, kids, never put all your eggs in one basket. The rarity of the game obviously has to do with its Blockbuster release. When you rented a game from Blockbuster, you would rarely get it in the box and would instead get it in one of Blockbuster's own plastic cases, together with a manual. Oftentimes the manual would get lost within the first few rentals. The original boxes were mainly used as display pieces to hook you into renting the game, and were eventually thrown out in favor of new items. Yeah, they thought that getting rid of the box for Stunt Racer in exchange for games like Racer, Freestyle, Scooter, and f***ing Daikatana was a good idea. The cartridges themselves would also get in pretty bad shape, not only because Blockbuster would slap these impossible to remove stickers right over the label, but because hundreds of kids were using the same cart, leaving it scratched, cracked, or full on broken. Just the cartridge without anything to go with it in good condition will run you between $200 to $300. But is this game really worth the high price if you're not a hardcore collector?
Probably not, but hey, let's check anyway.
So this is where I'd like to talk a little bit about the plot, but what is there to say? It basically amounts to...
I wanna be the very best, like no one ever was. To race them all is my real test, to claim all of their cars.
I mean, what did you expect? It's a racing game. Oh, and I don't have a car. There is very little in terms of plot here, which is unfortunate since the world Boss Games managed to build is actually really interesting. The SR3K, or Stunt Race 3000, is obviously what the game centers around, but what makes it interesting are the characters in the world. Boss Games' version of the year 3000 is similar to that of Back to the Future. Everything has a 1950s vibe to it. The cars, the tracks, the characters, and I must say, I really like this style. I mean, check out Strawberry here, she's just a 50s roller skate diner waitress. Oh, and apparently they have a special in Rumble Packs today.
Sir, can I take your order?
I'll have the double cheeseburger, strawberry milkshake, and the Nintendo 64 Rumble Pack, please.
The opponents you race against all have a little profile with some flavor text telling you about each of them. This page also tells you what their favorite tracks are, which seems like a relic of a dead mechanic, but more on that later. When you start the game, you get to pick a character as well, each with their own personalities and rides. This all comes together surprisingly well and makes the world feel pretty well thought out. Unfortunately, even though we get all this flavor text for all these characters, that's really all it is. It's not very fleshed out, which is unfortunate because I could totally see this being a Saturday morning cartoon in the 90s. The SR3K can almost be seen as a theme park with different roller coasters and rides to go on. Are you in the mood to be scared? Well, why don't you hit up the House of Horrors? Looking for some tropical weather? Well, then Tacky Tiki's got you covered. More of a fantasy kind of guy? Then Medieval Mayhem will be right up your alley with both Dungeons and Dragons. All of the tracks have personality and are a ton of fun to drive through. I think my personal favorite track is,
Hey Jake,
Yeah?
are you done coming up with track ideas?
Oh shit.
Giant Toys. This track really feels like it was plucked straight out of the mind of a child, and I just love that. The track itself is also really fun with very few sharp turns, letting you build up some real speed. This is probably since it's the second track you unlock in the game. The latter tracks are a lot more complex and harder to traverse. Creepy Carney probably being the most interesting when it comes to track design. Take this part for example. You can choose to go straight ahead and jump into this creepy clown's mouth, but that comes with a straight up U-turn at the end, which brings all that speed you've been building up to a halt. Or you could take this other path, which leads to a much thinner road, meaning it's harder to keep off the walls. There's also a jump on this path, but if you mess this jump up, you will probably roll your car. If that happens, you have to reset starting back at where the track splits. It's basically a risk-reward scenario. The lower path is much faster if you pull it off, but if you mess it up, it can cost you the race. This of course keeps the race interesting, but I'm a simple man. I like to go fast on tracks that allow it, so Giant Toys is still my favorite. The tracks and cars also look incredible. Boss Games really knew how to pull off good looking graphics on the 64. I mean look, the cars have reflections, while Mario Kart 64 carts aren't even a 3D model. If you took this game and added some new textures and up-resed it to HD, I could actually legitimately see myself buying this on current hardware. Anyway, what does the gameplay loop consist of? Yeah, that's not the hardest thing to figure out, it really wears that on its sleeve. The emphasis is very much on the racing. Stunts are there to earn you cash, which you can use to upgrade your ride or buy new cars, which is very much essential to your success. If you don't do enough stunts during the races, you won't have enough money to get better cars, which will eventually lead to the races being unbeatable. I have to say the stunt mechanic is pretty bare bones. It basically amounts to get some air, tap your control stick in different directions to perform flips and rolls. And that's pretty much it. I would have preferred a more physics-based stunt mechanic where you could hold the control stick in a direction and start a spin. Maybe it could gain speed the longer you held it, which would also mean it would take some time for it to slow back down for a good landing. Maybe they could have given you a little speed boost for successfully pulling off a stunt, making it a bit more risk-reward. Honestly, the stunts are really the weakest part of the game. Thankfully, the racing is good enough to make up for it. When I first started the game, I was very thrown off by the controls. They felt very slippery to me, almost like sliding around a Mario Kart ice track constantly. I think the best way to explain it is the car is basically in a state of constant drift. Let's say you turn left. Well, that will have both the front of the car turn left and the back of the car turn right at the same time. This can be seen as pretty frustrating, but the more I played, the more I got used to the controls, and surprisingly enough, I actually kinda grew to love them. Pulling off a turn while maintaining your speed is extremely satisfying, and I think that is very much thanks to the way the cars control. If you do end up hitting a wall slowing you down, you get 3 boosts per race. I tend to use these to either overtake one of my opponents, to regain some speed, or to access a hidden path of a level like this one in Medieval Mayhem. You can get more than 3 boosts per race though. Picking up these N symbols will grant you an instant boost, and picking up these T symbols will give you one of your used boosts back. The boosts make it go pretty darn fast though, so if used poorly they can have you bumping into walls left and right, which can actually negatively impact your placement, so they have to be used strategically. Now this next part is my biggest gripe with the game, but it's very much debatable. To unlock the different tracks of the game, you have to play through the single player campaign, which consists of different leagues. Each league has a set amount of rounds, which has a set amount of tracks you need to race, called heats. Remember that dead mechanic I spoke of earlier? Well, when a round begins, you need to select which heat you would like to race in. The longer you wait, the further back you start in the race. This was put here so that you could read the names of the opponents and make an assessment on whether or not you wanted to race them on their favorite track, since that would give them the upper hand. This is a fine mechanic I suppose, but I can't find any evidence that who you race makes any difference whatsoever, so I feel like they maybe should have just cut that out of the game. Now, that isn't my biggest gripe, but something I thought I would mention. My biggest gripe is how many rounds you have to play to unlock new stages. This game makes you race the same tracks over and over and over again, just to unlock new tracks. This not only makes you so good at the tracks that they're no longer a challenge, but it also makes you really sick of them. I was just constantly begging for a new track. I think that having to unlock stuff in games is a fine idea. I mean, it makes sense. Take Super Smash Bros. For example. If a new player has everything available to them from the get-go, it would be really difficult to know where to start. But since you start off with just a few characters and stages, you get the hang of those before unlocking other ones. This method works really well. However, if a pro Smash player picks up a new Smash game, they most likely want all the content straight from the get-go. This is where a cheat code would be perfect. I think forcing people to play your game in a way they don't want to play it to get what they want out of it is the wrong way to go about it. In Stunt Racer 64, I wanted to see all the tracks because they interested me, and because I was going to make a video about them. A cheat code to unlock all the tracks would have been perfect in my case. Now, with all that being said, for good and for bad, I enjoyed Stunt Racing 64. It's really unfortunate that the game didn't get more widely available, since it's actually really fun. Sure, it's got its flaws, and no games like this could compete with Mario Kart in sales figures, but if I had this as a kid, I'm sure it would have been one of my favorite games to play with friends. Is it worth $200 to $300 for a non-collector? God, no. But I would absolutely call it a hidden gem for the N64.
Perfect! Just in time for my weekly bank check. I'm sure it must be looking pretty good after investing in this game. Oh god!